Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and I'm here with Brent Rader. Brent's actually my second set of brothers I've interviewed, so we're really making progress on this show. Brent grew up in Panama City, Florida, where his family had a business called the Ocean Opry. They did 200 shows a year, and they got to open and meet a who's who of old school country artists, including Merle Haggard, Jerry Reed, Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, and so on. Man, every time I hear Jerry Reed's name, I just think of what a wonderful player that guy was. Just
went in the Hall of Fame this weekend.
That's fantastic. I mean, it was magic when he played.
Brilliant, yeah.
Brent's been on the stage since he was literally 1 week old.
That is correct.
That's amazing. So you have no excuse to be bashful at all, ever.
None.
Okay.
No.
All right, good. He's originally from Panama City, as I said. He's been in Nashville for 13 years. And if you want more information on the Ocean Opry or on, Brent's background or Brent's family, check out the conversation I had with Brent's brother, Danny, and that's in episode 84. Brent owns and operates Brent Rader Productions, as well as he's a tour and musical director. He tours with and he's musical director for country artist Joe Nichols. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays drums, bass, guitar, piano, mandolin, banjo, bouzouki, ukulele, and if he's had enough liquor, ganjo. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
A few of the artists he's toured with and or produced tracks for: Joe Nichols, Billy Dean, Joe D. Messina, Colin Ray, Jana Kramer, Mickey Guyton, Point of Grace, Oak Ridge Boys, Lee Greenwood, and he's working with a brand new artist he's really excited about, McKenzie Naps, Knapps. He specializes in country music, but he's definitely no stranger to any style that walks in the door. He likes to golf and hang out at the beach when the opportunity arrives. Shocking for somebody from Panama City. I can't believe that.
That really should have been at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Like that and then all the music stuff.
Yeah, priorities, man. What's the deal? Anyway, Brent, I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Appreciate it, Craig.
Man, so you're a very busy guy, and you're definitely not short on talent. What are you working on now that you're most excited about, or which projects?
There's a few things in the can right now. I just got through producing a track for a group of guys called the Frontmen of Country Music. And this group is made up of Larry Stewart from Restless Heart back in the 80s, Richie McDonald from Lone Star, and Tim Rushlow from Little Texas.
Oh, cool.
And they go out as a trio and do essentially a glorified acoustic show. They all play themselves, so there's like 3 or 4 players on stage. And they're all singing their hits from their bands that they come from. A lot of banter, it's just a really fun night, and they're extremely talented. But they've decided to go in and record new music together as a group, almost kind of a modern take on what the Highwaymen did back in the 80s. You've got these guys that all have their own careers and things going, but the combination of those voices together is great. So we've just finished the first single for them on that record, and we're going to get in probably around the first of the year and start working on an entire record.
Awesome.
And that was great, very fun.
And you produced them. You produced this.
Yeah, I did.
What kind of producer are you in the studio?
I'm really hands-on. I'm a kind of a one-stop shop. I do a lot of the heavy lifting myself, where I play a lot of different instruments. I'm able to keep cost at a place where most artists really like it because I can. I don't have a lot of outside expense to be able to have to go rent studios and hire players in. On your standard, country or pop production, I end up being able to play everything other than steel guitar or fiddle myself.
Oh, so you're like you're like it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not really because I'm a control freak, because I'm not. I would love to bring in the who's who's list of everybody, but that gets expensive, and that is the same way that everybody else does it. So for me to set myself apart and be able to offer artists and management companies and labels something different, they really like that. They're able to come out here and get outside of town by about 30 minutes and not have the pressure of Music Row, not have the pressure of studio time and the clock ticking and all these seasoned session guys that are, cracking jokes behind the artist's back about this and that. There's a lot of psychological dynamic that goes on in a session like that. And they love the idea of being able to just sit there with their producer, work one-on-one, express their ideas, and be heard, and have a lot more input. And so I get a lot of traction that way as a producer, and not everybody does it that way. And that's not necessarily, it's not a right or wrong thing. Sure. There's different ways to make records. And so I'm kind of taking that pop approach that has always been there, where you have a guy that does a lot of the heavy lifting himself, and bringing that to country, which has not been happening for the last 20 years. That's
a real good differential too, because it's a very specific one, and it's going to fit people that have that, that want that more interpersonal action.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And also, just to let everybody know, when I say Brent plays these instruments, he actually is like professionally proficient in these instruments. It's not like every guitar player could play a little bass. Every guitar player can play a banjo, or you know what I'm saying. I mean, you're actually proficient in these. So I wanted to just explain that to everybody. It's not like, hey, he could do little drums, and he's been doing this for a really long time.
Sure.
Okay, so you got the frontman of country music.
Got that. Also working on some stuff with Joe Nichols, the artist that I tour with. We've started going in and cutting some classic country covers of some things. It's in this day and age, when you cut a covers record or a classics record, it can be a kiss of death for an artist, because it essentially signals to the industry, oh, I'm done, I'm hanging it up. But an artist like Joe Nichols could have been doing this stuff from day one, because, I mean, he sings Haggard as good as Haggard sang it. I mean, he's an incarnation of that. And so his fan base really wants to hear him do that kind of music. And so we're trying to be really creative about what outlet they end up using to deliver this to fans and everything. But we've started by going in and cutting a few things, and the response has been tremendous amongst all the people involved with management and the label and everybody. They're all really thrilled about it.
That's all. And you're doing the same thing. You're doing production, and you're playing.
Same thing. We did everything here at my place. I played everything except steel and fiddle on it. I brought in a couple guys to do that and overdub on it. And then I sang on it, mixed it, did all that here.
That's wild, man. I cannot believe how much you do.
It's kind of crazy sometimes. And, I work really fast. My workflow is streamlined. I've been working at it for, 15 years here in town nearly. And so I've got it down to my process, and I know what works for me. And so I have to be careful when I'm working with somebody new not to come across as just a power happy, slave driver, like it's my way or no way. But I know what works.
Yeah.
I've gotten in a groove with what works for me specifically. And so, when they get in here, I try to guide them through that whole process. And as long as they go with it and don't buck up too much and have a workflow of their own that doesn't work with that, then it works great. It's a good process.
No, I think it's really important to have a system and to be confident and stick with it. I mean, like in my businesses, I always, I do things this way. Excuse me. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's totally fine. We're not a fit. But, I can't have you coming in here and telling me how to run my business, because that's not, so that's totally smart, I think, on your part.
I don't do my best work at that point, and you
right.
hired me. And you hired me to do my best work, so I'm going to try to do that the way I know how to do it.
Do you feel like a lot of pressure as far as, when you're in the studio, musicians always second guess themselves, like, man, I wanted to play a different solo and I wish you'd have let me play it, but the artist likes it. But now you're doing this with like 5 or 6 instruments.
Right. Correct.
So is that like a challenge for you mentally to say, okay, like done is better than perfect? But
absolutely. I always tell my artists when they get in here now, they call it good enough because it's good enough.
Right.
A lot of people will dog on you and say, well, good's the greatest enemy of great and all that stuff. And yeah, that's no excuse to not do your best work. But the truth of the matter is the listener will never know what's on the cutting room floor.
Correct.
All is what made the final mix.
Correct.
If that's a good part and that's the right part for the record, then you're done.
Yeah.
You keep doing it. And the other thing is I rely a lot on technology. I think you have to in this modern day and age. And so, when I'm singing background vocals, I'm not going to sit there and waste a half an hour on something that I can tune in 60 seconds, as long as it's close enough. And that doesn't mean I can't sing it in tune. It just means that there's no sense in wasting time.
Right. So you could post-production fix it is what you're saying?
Absolutely. Because I know I'm the one mixing it and I'm the one seeing this thing all the way through to the end. I don't have to trust necessarily that a producer is going to take it to a mix engineer and the right part made it, they chose the right playlist or this or that. I'm the one doing it. So I trust me a lot.
Yeah. And your guys have to trust you, otherwise they wouldn't be there. And
That's right.
you know that already because they're there, and it's not like you put a gun to their head. So
Exactly.
okay, so Joe Nichols. Anything else?
Well, you mentioned McKenzie. She's a brand new artist out of Louisiana. She comes from Baton Rouge and is extremely talented. I'm blown away by how good of a singer she is and writer at her age. She's only 19 years old right now, and is writing stuff that is really deep, really heavy, really good. And there's not a whole lot of root there yet. We're still kind of figuring out what's going to happen with her and what's going on. But I'm really excited to see what the future holds. I think you're going to hear big stuff from her.
So how'd you get hooked up with her?
She met me at a show. We were playing at a club down in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, and I think she snuck backstage or something and grabbed my shirt arm and said, "Hey, are you Brent?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, they told me I need to talk to you. They said you produce and you make records." And I said, "Sure, I do. Who are you?" And I'm thinking, here's another one, young girl, whatever.
Right.
And so she started letting me know some of the other folks in Nashville that she had met and was working with, and she was very well plugged in. That these were legit people that she was talking to, and so that changed my whole mood with her and said, "Okay, you know what you're doing." And she happened to be coming to Nashville a couple weeks later, and we got together and had lunch. Her and her mom came up, and really nice people, and had a really good head for the business as well as the talent side of it. And so I said, "Well, let's continue this. Let's write a little bit, let's produce a little bit, and see what we get."
That's great. So you mentioned that she's writing some heavy stuff. So she's not going to be like she's going to be more of a country artist, not the pop, my boyfriend or stuff like that.
I mean, she's obviously 19 years old. And so, she's very in touch with what the modern listener wants to hear. And so she does write some pop stuff, but she writes really good pop stuff, if that makes sense. There's even amongst that stuff, there is a quality level that I think some people get and some people don't. And so right now, she has very little recording experience under her belt. And I told her the first thing we need to do is just get in and start recording a lot of different kind of things and find out what works, what suits your voice, what suits your style, and let's kind of find a niche for what you do. So we're recording a little bit of all of it. We've got some singer-songwriter type things. We've got some pop type things. We've got some country type things. And we're just going to see what people respond to in town.
How do you test something like that? Like, to get proof of concept? Like, what do you put it out to certain people or a couple of cuts here and there? Or
yeah, I've got enough industry friends that I can just kind of play some things for when it's all said and done. And I think, too, our own intuition knows as well once we get in there. Everything she had so far was just a guitar vocal work tape. And so in her mind, she had this vast array of songs. And once she hears them being produced as records, she started realizing, okay, they're all a lot more down one lane than I thought, and she can finally start hearing the continuity of everything. And so, you just start hearing them and going, okay, maybe this one is a good singer-songwriter song, but it didn't make a great record.
Gotcha.
Because you run into that.
Can you tell ahead of time, like, how accurate is it when you look at a song? Can you tell because of your experience? Yeah, I think this will be good, or do you just let them do it anyway, so they have to learn themselves? Like, what's the?
I have a pretty good gauge on it because, like I say, I'm taking it from inception to completion. And when I hear a song, I'm hearing records, even though they're just playing a work tape. I hear parts, I hear mixed stuff, I hear background vocals, I hear all that on the front end of it when they don't hear that.
Right.
So I have a pretty good gauge on where it's going to end up. Now, whether or not it's going to be good, I don't know. Sometimes you run into some luck here and there, and something that you didn't think was going to be great turns out pretty awesome. And vice versa. One that you just were absolutely sure was going to be great might be sitting there a little bit flat when it's all said and done. And like you mentioned a second ago, there is a certain amount of letting them learn. She's 19 and I'm trying to develop her in this business, and I want to develop her intuition. So I want her to go through that whole process, and because they're not always going to believe what I say on the front end. I can tell them this works, but until they experience it and they go through it, they're not going to know why I felt that way.
Kind of like being married sometimes.
That's exactly right.
Man, this is the funniest thing. My wife's car broke down yesterday, and the tow truck guy had to come, and I'm in the car, and I said, "Hey, babe, why don't you take these cords out?" And she goes, "No, leave them in there." And I said, "All right." And the guy goes, "You should take those cords out." She goes, "Hey, take the cords out." I said, "Man, he's a genius, isn't he?" He said, "Don't feel bad. My wife is the same way."
Oh, one of the best quotes I ever heard one time is, "You can get so much more done in life if you stop worrying about who gets the credit."
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I've had people say stuff to my kids, and they come home and they think they're geniuses, and I'm like, man, I've been telling you that for 10 years, but I've learned to shut up. I just say, okay, great. I'm really glad that you got that message.
Absolutely.
Move on. You know,
that is a big element of producing, is sitting back and realizing that what you're doing is motivating people to perform, and you're trying to draw a performance out of them, and whatever it takes to make that happen, then you do it, and you're not worried about getting credit for it.
Let me ask you this. You seem like you're, and I mean this in a good way because I'm the same, a type A, like you're always on, you know,
Sure.
and you're, you know, like when you said, I'm hearing this and I'm hearing vocals and I'm hearing backgrounds and I'm hearing guitar fills.
Yeah.
Is it hard for you to enjoy music in general because of that?
Very much, actually. Yeah. A lot of people talk to me and ask me about that, and I've done this, like we said, since I was a week old, and so music is not my hobby anymore. It's not a pastime for me like it is for a lot of people. This is my vocation. It's my job, you know, and I treat it as such. And I don't ever want to come off like I don't enjoy it, because I love my job and I love what I do. But I do approach it in a very different way, I think, than some people do because of that, because of all these years of experience, you know.
It's almost, what's that? I'm sorry.
I don't regret that a bit. I mean, I actually where I am with it. Yeah,
totally. But I could see, like, when you hear something, it'd be tough to sit and, without saying, man, they really should have, you know, turned up the bass over there for that line, or, you know, why didn't they do a different fill there? Or
I find where I do enjoy that a lot is, like, if I've got a flight and I just pop in earbuds and I lay my head back and my phone's in airplane mode and I know the world's not going to contact me right now. There's no expectation with it. That's when I enjoy music, and that's when I sit back and just listen to sounds and get moved by it and listen to lyrics and that sort of thing. And plus, I end up going back to old music a lot. I have a hard time getting moved by new music.
Who do you like? What do you like listening to?
Man, I love anything with good chops and good playing and good tones. You know, I was thinking about some old records and stuff that I tend to go back to a lot. I go back to a lot of Western swing stuff. Bob Wills, For the Last Time, was a great record. It's the last record he made with the Texas Playboys. Haggard was on there, came in and sang because he used to be in the band. The songs are great, and you just hear the humanness in everything. You know, it's not completely perfected. Like James Taylor, you know, live record, I go back to that a lot. I'm surprised, big Jimmy Buffett fan growing up at the beat. Jimmy Buffett music, because you know what? It's like, this guy never had a #1 record until It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere with Alan Jackson, and yet that's what we all gravitate towards when we're grilling burgers and having a beer on the deck.
Yeah, for sure.
He does something that makes us feel good, and that's the point of all of this, is to make people's lives a little bit better than it was before they listen to your song.
Totally,
you know?
Absolutely, man. It's funny. I interviewed Moose Brown, the guy who wrote.
Oh yeah, there you go.
and he you know, we were just talking on text or something, and he goes, okay, well, call me later. And I was like, I said, man, I was like, 5 o'clock. I was thinking of saying, like, oh, 5 o'clock, right? And I said, I don't know the guy. You know, he might think I'm, like, super sarcastic. So I didn't say anything. And then when I talked to him, I said, I was going to say that. He goes, I said, but I figured you heard that 100 times. He goes, actually, no one's ever done that. I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, no, that would have been really funny. I was like,
he's a funny guy, dude.
He is a funny guy. Yeah, he was awesome. He was awesome. Okay, do you like producing better or playing? Or it seems like playing for you when you're producing is a means to an end.
It is. Yeah, it's all kind of one ball of wax for me when I get into the studio. Ironically, I don't get a lot of calls here in town to go play on sessions for other people. Occasionally I do. And when I do, I have to sort of mentally get in that place, because I walk in the door and I'm not the producer today, and I'm just sitting there playing on somebody else's record, and you have to gauge how much do I speak up about ideas and things that I have without undermining the guy on the other side of the glass, because I've been in that other spot, and I don't want a group of players sitting there trying to tell me how to produce a record if I'm the one in charge. I want their input, and I value that, but you can get into some real headbutting in the studio sometimes if you get somebody really married to an idea that they just don't want to budge on, but you've got a different end goal in mind as the producer. And so you're trying to graciously tell them, shut up and do what I told you to do.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you're the guy being paid to make, with the responsibility of making the final decision.
Exactly. And different guys produce differently. You know, some go in there trying to make their record every time they go in the studio, and some go in there trying to make their artist's record. And I try to be really mindful of the record my artist is making, and all the suggestions and all the ideas need to go towards that end goal. So for me, playing, I love playing and I enjoy doing it. I think I get more enjoyment out of playing when I play live, and I get on stage and I can just be a piano player or a guitar player or whatever that night and do that, and I'm not thinking about a production or a record. Because I think if tape's rolling, then my producer head is going.
Yeah, you know, totally. When you're out with Joe, what do you play mostly?
It's a utility spot for me out there. So when I took the gig, it was acoustic guitar, electric guitar, I think primarily, and they had a dedicated piano player at the time. Well, over the couple of years that I had been there, the piano player ended up going away, and they had me add keys as well to what I was doing.
Oh, wow.
And then we hired an acoustic player earlier this year. And so now it's down to just electric guitar and keys, depending on the song. And since I'm the MD on that gig, I kind of get to choose which one makes more sense song to song. And it usually has to do with solo stuff and staging, you know, where we need to have bodies at a certain time. If he needs me up running around, putting on a little more of a show, I don't want to be stuck on the keyboard on that song, you know. Sure. And so we utilize a tracks rig a little bit out there, and I'll usually dump whatever I'm not playing into the tracks rig for that song.
Gotcha. You don't have to answer this question if you're uncomfortable. Do people get paid more if you're multi-instrumentalist? If you know, now you're also doing background vocals. I mean, you do a lot of things.
Not in my experience. I've always said that I think singers should get more because it's one extra job, and you have to keep yourself healthier when you're a singer. You know, if you have a head cold, you can still go out there and play drums or guitar that day, but if you have a head cold, you can't sing. And so singers have to work a little bit harder as far as that goes with the life that comes with all of this. But in my experience, no, it's a democracy out there, and everybody's making the same money as far as I can tell. Interesting.
So I'm surprised at that, because it's almost like, and I'm not trying to obviously start anything, I'm just thinking like from a business standpoint, it's almost like disincentivizes somebody.
It does.
You know, like, okay, you know, I do 5 things and I'll get paid the same thing as that dude doing 1.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird.
The only thing that it does, I think, for me is it's always created job security for me because you form a pretty big footprint in a gig when you take on that many things. And if the time ever comes that they try to make a move and change that out, it gets really difficult to replace you.
Yeah.
So what you do have, even though it's not monetary, is you have security on that gig. Thankfully, I've never been fired from a gig. I've always left on my terms when it was time to go. And that's a tough thing, because you feel a sense of responsibility to make sure they're taken care of as an artist, and that they're going to have what they need when you walk away. You know, but like I say, and it's usually put me in a position too of leadership by doing several things like that. It's gotten me the MD gig on several gigs. And so it works out in ways of compensation that aren't necessarily monetary, but it does work out.
And I guess you also get opportunities to showcase talents in front of somebody, and now a guy sees you playing drums or, you know, bouzouki or whatever, and then, hey, you know, man, I saw you at this gig, and if you weren't doing that, so you're creating more opportunities. Yeah, I see that.
Another great example was like when I worked for Jody Messina, I was the keyboard player in that band Strictly, and when I came in, I was singing as well, so I was doing keys and background vocals, and because she wanted to have her background vocals consistent from the full band shows to the acoustic shows, they asked me, well, do you play anything else so that we can take you out on the acoustic shows? Can you strum acoustic on those, or can you play a cajon? You know, and so I ended up doing some of the other guys in the band's job on the acoustic shows to keep the vocals consistent.
Gotcha.
So in that case, it got me more work than what I would have got if I was just the keyboard player.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have faith like that. I don't know, work ethic in general is going to be rewarded. And like you said, it's not always tit for tat dollar compensation, but creating opportunities like that is certainly, you know, a very good reward.
Exactly.
So, what do you think the biggest impact of your total early immersion in music through your folks and, you know, through the Ocean Opry, what do you think that impact has had on your success today?
I would say it got the stars out of my eyes early, because as a young kid, I got to see the backstage version of a lot of artists and band guys, and I could see what this life really looked like. You know, I saw how beat up some of these road guys looked when they showed up for a 9 a.m. load in, and they looked hungover and they looked like they'd been through their third divorce or whatever, you know, and I heard their stories. And so when I got to town, there was no disillusion about how hard this life is. And I didn't go through that period of meeting my heroes and being really disappointed when I saw that it wasn't exactly the way that a publicist presents it. So I see that a lot out of young artists and band guys. They get up here and they just seem so green, and they start seeing how this industry works, and they get really discouraged really quickly when they realize it's not all about the music, that this is actually business, you know. So for me, that's what it did for me. It taught me to treat this as a business and my vocation, and realize that I could just as easily be a plumber or an electrician or a yard guy or a lawyer or a doctor, but I'm a musician, and so that's how I earn my money, and so I need to treat that as a business. And think with my head, not with my heart, most of the time.
So your learning curve was rapidly escalated because of this, as far as, you know, business, you know, running a business.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I got all the music part of it out of my system early enough, you know, to where I wasn't doing that at the same time as I was having to learn Nashville and the music business.
You had some, your brother was saying you guys had some pretty cool times when you were like the only session guys in town. So you were like the Mac Daddies at like 17 and 18 or something like that. That was a pretty cool story.
We were definitely the big fish in a small pond, I'd say. And not because we were that great, just because there were no other fish in the pond. You know?
But what great experience that was for you. I mean, you know, have that much studio time, that much freedom at such a young age, and to be getting paid for it.
Yeah, it's the best education you can get, is to hear yourself back or watch yourself back. I don't care what you're doing. If you want to know how the rest of the world perceives you, then you need to get yourself in their shoes, and you either need to be watching yourself or listening to yourself. And for us, we were getting paid to go do that. You know, some guys spend a lot of money to go to big recording schools or music schools and go through that same process, and they come out of it hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in student loans. And we said, well, we can do this down here, spend the same 4 years playing on every little custom project that walks in the door. And on top of hearing ourselves back and actually getting good at the playing, the part that we learned that they don't teach anywhere is how to work with clients, how to work with artists, how to work that whole scene and understand it, because there is no way to teach that. You've got to get out and do it. And so we had a lot of experience in that before we even showed up to town.
So your communication skills, your social skills were specifically for this even honed really, really ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. You know, chart writing, all of that stuff. Like there was one particular studio we used to work at that really didn't do a whole lot for pre-production at all on a record. So, you know, standard day was you show up at 9 a.m., artist walks in the door with probably 10 songs to cut that day by 5 or 6 o'clock, because nobody wants to stay past dinner. And you don't know what they're bringing in. You don't know what kind of songs they are. And I was the chart writer because I was the piano guy. And so they started just handing us these songs. Here, write a chart. And I'm sitting there working while 3 other guys are standing around drinking coffee and talking, because nobody wanted to write charts ahead of time. And, you know, some of the things they're giving you are not 3-chord country songs. You know, it was these big gospel choir arrangements that would go through 4 key changes and, you know, had chords that I'd never even heard of. And, you know, I remember the early days of doing that. It would take me an hour to write a chart on one song. And I felt horrible about that, because these people are spending money on studio time, you know, to sit there and watch me write a chart. So I got really good at that really quick, because of the time factor. Time's money, you know.
That's really cool, man. That's a great experience you got. And I think that was really good of you at a young age to, you know, take that responsibility so seriously.
Well, it developed my ear a lot, and I saw that. And like I say, going back to what I talked about earlier, that's when I was way into music. That's when I was still learning new chords and learning new grooves, and I was excited about what is this and finding that out, you know. Sure. So that I've learned all that, and I've got that in my skill set now. It's just something I do, you know, and it doesn't really spark any emotion or anything like that. And I can do it all fairly quickly now because of it.
What's cool, you guys basically got paid for tuition. Mm-hmm. You know, most people have to pay to learn. Exactly. You got paid to learn, which is wonderful, man.
That's exactly right. The trick, though, was that we took the opportunity. We kept our eyes and our ears open. Did it. You know, I knew guys that would also get booked on those things that didn't take that opportunity. And they were annoyed by the fact that they were having to play on a gospel record today and deal with people that had completely different political views than them and wanted to go eat at a restaurant that they had no desire in eating at for lunch. And so they would just cross their arms and pitch a fit and not learn anything.
Oh, man.
They didn't get called back very much, you know, and they missed a great opportunity because of that.
Oh, yeah, man. That's crazy. You know, we all pay tuition, and I'm sure you have over your career as far as, you know, mistakes you've made. And I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to maybe share one or two of the mistakes you made and the big lessons that you learned from that, or the takeaways.
You know, when I moved to town, for as much experience as I had, there was one big piece of it that I didn't know anything about, and that was networking, because we had a family business. I always had a 10 gig. I didn't go through that period in my high school and college years of going out and like finding bands and networking with other musicians around town and getting gigs around town because I didn't have to. So when I got to Nashville, I was way behind the curve on that. But it kind of worked because I moved to town with a gig. Danny and I both moved up here. He moved before me by about 6 or 7 months.
Was that weird when he left? Because you guys have been, you're not only brothers, but you're like, I can't imagine how close you guys are.
We spent a lot of time in the car driving back and forth to these sessions because they were all about an hour to an hour and a half away from where we grew up in Panama City. So, you know, we'd get 2 to 3 hours of just drive time several times a week. You know, so we spent a lot of time hanging out. We were really good friends and still are. I don't say that to say we're not anymore, but,
yeah.
But, you know, when he moved and left, it really put a kink in what we had set up as a business model. And he came back quite a bit during that first period of time just because it was solid work, you know, and as long as he didn't mind to drive back to Florida from Nashville every few weeks, we could still do those sessions and work on that stuff. I think that's probably what pushed me into learning guitar more and getting into that side, because now all of a sudden we didn't have our guitar player that we had, and it needed to be done, you know, and so I knew how to play guitar, but I hadn't developed it yet. And that kind of pushed me into the mode of developing that. But all that to say, when we moved to town, we met Billy Dean right there at the end of our time in Panama City, a country artist. And Billy put both of us in his band that year, kind of sight unseen. We did one gig and he hired us, which was a huge gamble for him looking back. I really didn't think he was serious about it because I knew enough about the business to know he's an artist. He's gotten excited about something he saw at a show.
Right.
His man's probably going to shut him down and say, no, you're not hiring these 2 kids from Florida. Right. We've got kids in Nashville that are going to be in your band, you know, end of story. Well, sure enough, he called and said, hey, I want you guys to do this. And so I moved to town to be his drummer at the time. That's what I came to town to do and had a gig. So, again, I didn't have to network to get that gig. It found me. And I began making friends and meeting guys on that gig. But I think I kind of just expected the phone to start ringing because I was meeting people. And I didn't know how to forge those relationships. And I didn't understand that networking has a lot more to do with making friends than it does making business contacts.
Yeah.
Because at this point in my career, the people that would call me for gigs are actually my friends. They're people that care about my well-being, you know, and of course they've spread the word, and you develop a reputation over years of doing something into town and a business. But that was one thing I think I didn't learn. I got married early, and And when I got married, I was very
how old were you? How old were you?
I was 27 then. I'm 37 now. And so I was very intent on being, husband of the year and being really great at it, like we all do, right out of the shoot. And when I was home and off the road, she wanted me to be home a lot and not out and hanging out downtown and networking and all that. And I bought into that and thought it made sense. Looking back, those were the formidable years that I really should have been out spending some time so that you can enjoy the later years. It takes a lot of work on the front end to build up a reputation in a business and that kind of thing. So if I would say I made any mistake, it was that I didn't dive into the networking thing enough and start building those relationships sooner. Because, you've only got a certain amount of time to work with in this business.
When did you start, and what did you do? Because it's always tough to you want to be sincere about it, because you can't just show up and the guys that business meetings are passing out business cards. It's just repulsive,
And that's what I had to learn, was that there are so many times that there's not a direct paycheck involved, that you go and you hang out with guys and you buy a round of drinks or you pick up their meal or say, hey, let's take a Friday morning and get coffee, even though I've got some work that needs to be done at the house on somebody's record that they sent me, that is going to give me an immediate paycheck. When you're young and broke and need to pay your mortgage, to gravitate towards the immediate paying jobs. But I look back now and realize that it's those times that you hang out with people and the coffee and the stuff like that ends up getting you a gig that brings you far more money over the course of a year than that immediate paycheck. And you got to just learn how to balance all that. You can't let the other stuff go undone, because you do have to pay your bills and you do have to be responsible about all that. But you have to make some time and budget some time for the other, so that it's there for you later on down the road.
You seem pretty disciplined. I would imagine once you got you understood what you were dealing with, you pretty much did what you needed to do, though, right?
I made a conscious decision at one point. I had worked, like I said, I moved to town with Billy. The next gig I got was Jody Messina. And then after that, I went to work with Colin Ray. Well, all three of those are fantastically talented artists, but they were all on the downhill slope of their career at that point when I came in. And so there's a good paycheck involved with that. It's a good situation. They've gotten used to a certain level of treatment. You're not doing the baby act van gig and all that, so that's great, but there's no future in that.
Yeah.
So I got a call to go out with an artist that was doing a bigger tour with Jana Kramer at the time. She was a brand new out of the chute artist. I didn't know who she was. The pay was a little lower than what I was used to. But what I saw in that was the opportunity to meet an entirely new group of musicians that my path hadn't crossed yet. And so I went out there and did that for a while.
Drums again?
No, at that point I had moved. So let's address that real quick. While I was with Billy Dean, after about 7 or 8 months, the guy that was producing his record at the time became the band leader. And so he calls me one day and said, hey, man, we're making a few changes in the band. We've heard some of your demos and things you work on. We really like your singing, and we like your piano playing. We've heard some of that, and we think you're pretty decent at that. I want to talk to you about moving to the keyboard spot in this band instead of drums. If you're insistent on being a drummer, we're probably going to make a switch in that department, because I've got a guy I want to bring in that I like a little better. And so I thought, well, if I want to keep working, I guess this is what I need to do.
No, I'm totally good with keys, man. I was just thinking that.
Yeah, you'd say that. So I switched over to keys at that point and found out pretty quickly that at the time, there were a lot less guys in town that knew how to play country piano than knew how to rock a drum group. So it actually gave me an opportunity to shine a little more and build a little more of a reputation. All of a sudden, I was higher up on the ladder just because there were less guys attempting to do that at the time. And so I got the call to leave there and go with Jody Messina on keys as well. And so at that point, I was accepting that I was a piano player here in town, even though I knew how to play other things. And then when Jana's band called, the guy that called me had worked with me in Billy's band back in the day and knew that I played a few different things. And so he said they want a keyboard player, but they don't want to pay just a keyboard player. So he said, if you can play a little mandolin, maybe some acoustic, they're not sure what they need yet, but there may be more than just keys involved if you want to do this. And so I said, sure. So I went and I didn't even own a mandolin at the time. I went and bought one for it, but I knew how to play one. And so became the utility guy in that band. And that's when the utility position really started becoming a thing here in town. And as we would do gigs and people saw me, they were like, oh, you play a little bit of everything. That's cool. And so when Joe's camp called, that's what ended up happening there as well. They called for a utility guy that could do a few different things. And that's worked well for me at this point, It has for Danny as well. I think we've kind of established a new brand as Raiders.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Plays a few different things, call a Raider, so.
Well, it's funny, too. I've talked to so many guitar players that have said, like, they've been in a situation and someone says to them, hey, you got a banjo, right? And like, oh, yeah, of course. And then like they walk out of they're like, they either like call 10 buddies, man, I need a banjo, or they just go down to the store and grab a banjo and like,
Well, I've always told guys and advised them, I said, look, if you don't know if you have the gig yet, go borrow one or rent one for the day. And even if you have to do that for a little bit until you've got the gig and it's going to be solid, do that. And then go buy one once you've got the gig. And no one has to be any the wiser that way. And it'll get you through, because I say yes to everything.
You know what? I was just thinking that because I was processing in my mind as you were talking, the people that I've spoken to that have more working experience, that is what they've told me. Say yes to everything. Yeah,
absolutely.
Never say no.
You've got to have your own personal boundaries of what you really don't think you should do. And that old Disney mantra of no show is better than a bad show. I like that motto, and I live by that too. So if you're going to go out there and screw something up, don't do that.
Sure.
Because the bad press on your name is going to hurt you more than it helps you.
Sure.
But if you can do something and you can get through it, then say yes and do it.
Sure.
It's only going to get you more work and more confidence.
And more confidence too, which is great.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the flip side of that question, and thank you for sharing that mistake. Is there one or two things that you might have done which at the time you were like maybe skeptical or scared of, and in hindsight they turned out to be really big breakthroughs?
Yeah, playing mandolin on a gig. Saying yes to it, basically just the same thing, only flip side of it, of just saying yes and saying sure. When I took Joe's gig, I played electric guitar only in my studio. I had never played in a band on a gig as an electric guitar player.
Oh, really?
Those guys didn't know that, and I didn't tell them that.
Yeah.
But same kind of thing. They called and asked and said, "You play electric?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure." And I went out and bought an electric rig to get into that. Now I knew what I was doing. I knew how to do it. I just didn't have years of stage experience doing it.
Sure.
And lucky for me, it wasn't an electrically heavy gig. It was just a lot of rhythm stuff and things like that, which that's always kind of been my forte anyway. I'm not a shredder. I'm not a big chops guy. I'm more of a taste guy. I like parts. I like tones and that kind of thing. So that it worked for me on that gig.
What guitars did you go out and buy, if you remember?
A PRS Starla. I had just got through working with a guy on a gig that had one and was really impressed at how versatile that guitar was. And I talked to a couple other guys, and then that guitar got brought up again. And so I already had a little bit of a relationship with PRS, and called them, and they were able to work something out for me on that. And I continue to use that guitar on that gig. I've got a few different things now, but that one is a desert island guitar for sure.
Awesome, man. If you could go back and give advice to your younger self, and I say younger self, and you're like much younger than me, so I'm laughing at myself saying your younger self, but you've got so much, you've got basically 35 years of 37, you're as long as you've been alive. What advice might you have given, the 25 or the, 22-year-old Brent?
A couple things. One, save 10% of everything. It's just good business. Number two, I would say have fun. Don't sweat the small stuff. Remember that there's a season for all of this, and it all will pass. Nothing is forever. and enjoy it while it's here, and don't clench too hard to it when it's time to let it go. Because it needs to go. It's just part of it. And the other thing I would tell my younger self is start golfing sooner.
Yeah, man. You know what? Having fun is an important part of life, and you have to be deliberate about that, because if you're not,
this
is
a very stressful industry. There's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to keep straight in your head. It's not physically demanding, but the stress of it can make it physically demanding, because if your body's not responding well, we eat bad, we drink, we do all kinds of stuff that really does run ourselves in the ground. We don't get enough sleep, and just the mental stress of worrying about where the next paycheck's going to come from, or if you've got a gig or whatever. There's a lot that'll wear you down, and so you've got to find a release. And again, once music becomes your vocation, it's not your hobby anymore.
Yeah.
You don't want to go home and pick up a guitar and just play to make yourself feel better. It's reminding you of everything that you've been worried about.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think any entrepreneurial venture is like that, believe it or not, because coming from the business side, I've said, man, this is just like running any other business, and you get the same thing with the stress. Funny thing, just side note to what you said, do you know Adam Schoenfeld?
I do. Mm-hmm.
So I interviewed Adam, and I asked him, I said, hey, do you have any interests outside of music? And he said, yeah, guitar.
That's a great answer.
The whole interview was like that. I almost I couldn't even talk. I was just crying so hard.
Yeah.
Hey, what's your go-to guitar right now? Is it that PRS?
Yeah, I would take that Starla anywhere, to any gig. It covers so much ground across the board. The other stuff I've got, I started working with a company a few years ago called Zane Guitars up in Wisconsin. I don't know.
I've heard of them.
They make some really great guitars, and we kind of caught them on the front end of what they were doing. I know they've been through some different management and ownership stuff like that over the years. But what they were building us were just some really good guitars. I've got a couple of their Strats and a Tele that they built me. And, man, those things are solid guitars. Love them. They play great.
There's a lot of really good boutique builders now.
There are, yeah.
And it's really hard to pick one over there.
Especially the Fender style of things, I don't know how true this is, but somebody told me one time that there was some sort of a legal issue when their patent came up back in whenever it would have been, probably the 60s or something like that, that all that they really have patented is the headstock. And so,
Fender?
Yes, because the body style is not copywritten or patented.
Interesting.
Anybody can make an exact Tele replica or an exact Strat. And it's not that way with Gibson.
No.
I heard that. You see a lot less Les Paul copies. They have to get outside that box and do something unique and different if they want to do that. I thought that was really interesting.
You could see, you see that tobacco burst, but next to that is it's a quilted. It looks like a Les Paul. It's a Tom Anderson. That's called a Bulldog. That was only made for 3 or 4 years because they got a cease and desist from Gibson.
Right.
So yeah, obviously that's correct what you're saying. I don't know the legal ins and outs, but that is interesting.
That's why you'll see so many more Fender style knockoffs.
Yeah.
And copies, I should say.
For sure.
Some of them are better guitars. They're great.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Any cool or interesting stories behind how you acquired any of your guitars?
Not really. I'm kind of boring when it comes to that. As we've talked about, I'm a lot more of a creature of habit and just a worker when it comes to this industry. And so I just pick them up as I need them for tools.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge collector as far as that, because honestly, it's expensive to play all the different things that I play. I can't be just an acoustic guy and have this collection of great acoustics, or electrics or drums or whatever. I kind of buy what I need. And once I've got what I need and I've got the different colors that I need to accomplish the task, I just cap it off and say, okay, there it is.
That's cool.
And then if something comes along down the road that I just can't pass up, or I think of something that I want to get my hands on, then I'll look around for that and find it. What I'm really jonesing for right now is some sort of a jazz box. I don't have like a 335 or anything like that. I would love to have one of those.
Those are beautiful guitars, man. I love them. I really like them.
Style, just sort of a semi-hollow or even a full hollow would be great.
It's interesting. I have a question, and I'm not going to ask it to you, but it's ever sell a guitar you wish you can get back? And most guys say, yeah. So I asked your brother. He's like, I keep everything.
I'm actually really curious to see how similar our answers are to everything.
He said, I keep everything. He goes, I don't sell anything. I think I like it. I keep it.
I do too, because you never know when you might. Our dad was a notorious pack rat. He's got so much stuff that he's kept that is just worthless junk. And I think he passed that gene on to both of us. Because you just never know. I mean, how many times have people told that story of, my dad bought this thing, it laid under the bed forever, and now it's worth something. Now it's whatever, just because of the age and because it's seasoned, and people decided they wanted it. So I agree. I think instruments, especially quality instruments, are like real estate. They're only going to go up in value. You're never going to be sorry you have more of them. And if you need to sell them down the road, they're going to be worth more down the road than they are now. So just hang on to them,
No, I agree with you.
One day you can. So no, I've never sold anything either. I keep it all. The only thing I'll try to sell every now and then is maybe a keyboard, but those are difficult to get rid of because as the technology changes, nobody wants the old one. So even with those, I hang on to them because it never fails. You get a call for a gig in town somewhere and all your good stuff's out on the trailer, on the bus, with Joe's rig. And you're like, oh, dang it, I need something that I can go play organ on tonight. Oh, I got that one keyboard I bought that time that, it's sitting around doing nothing. I'll take it.
It's interesting. You might want to look into this. On eBay, there are people looking for specific parts.
Oh, yeah.
So you might be better off, like, if you have something that's really zero value to you, you may be better off disassembling it, selling off the parts, because, where's someone going to find a 1985 doohickey from this particular, right? And now that's worth a lot.
That is true.
Yeah. So keep that in mind, man.
Absolutely.
We do it all here, man. 3 favorite albums. You pretty much gave me those. Best childhood memory.
Best childhood memory. Man, that's tough. We have so many of them. I think collectively, just growing up where we did, getting to be a part of that show, being part of that venue. There was nothing cooler than getting to go up and hang out at the studio with my dad when I was a kid and watch him splice tape or whatever he was working on. He did everything there at the theater production-wise. So if they were making a record, he ran the studio and made that record. But if they were making a radio spot for a show that was coming in, he spliced all that together and did it. And I remember as a young kid, just the sounds and the smells and everything that were in that studio. It was musty and old and lots of used gear and everything. But there was just something about that was a really cool thing. And to get to go up there and hang out with him and be around all that stuff and kind of get in trouble was awesome.
That's fantastic. You know what I should have asked you? Was there anything in particular? You were like around all these iconic artists and really talented musicians. Was there anything in particular that you learned from any one of them?
That's a good question. I think I saw the business side of it, of the relationships, because we booked, Glenn Campbell's a great example. Of all the artists that we booked, and we booked a lot for 30 years, my granddad was promoting concerts there. The only artist that ever did this was Glenn Campbell. And at the end of the show, he went to him and said, well, how'd you do today? Talking about financially. And he says, we did all right. Not quite as good as I was anticipating, but we did all right. And Glenn's reply was, well, how much more do you wish you'd have made? What would have made it right? And so he told him, and Glenn knocked it off of his price.
You're kidding me.
And said, all right, it's right for you today. And left, and because he knew it was more valuable to keep a relationship with the promoter and he'd get booked back that way than if the promoter took a bath that day, lost money and said, yeah, I want to book that guy again because I lost out. He knew that the promoter would take a chance again next time if he made it right. So I learned from that, you don't have to be hard set on everything, be flexible, be willing to build those relationships. The Oak Ridge Boys were the same way. We had them year after year. And they would always come in for whatever money worked. It wasn't like, here's our set price. And I don't want to blow any secrets for them or anything like that.
Sure.
That's part of being an artist. You take tie-in dates. You take things that that makes sense. And it works both ways. Over the years, you build up a relationship to where if it is a particularly good show and things do well, they get bonuses and they do well that way. But that's what I learned about all that.
That's amazing. I'm blown away.
I don't know if Danny told you the Johnny Cash story either. This is a good one. We booked Johnny in 1987. So I was 7 years old then. And my granddad's mother was in intensive care at the hospital. She was a big Johnny Cash fan. Well, we booked him. He had June, Carter family. Everybody was there. Marty Stewart was even playing guitar with him at the time. This is back when Marty was a son. Yeah, this goes way back. And so at the end of the show, my granddad was doing the goodbyes and everything. He said, "Boy, we had a great time today, John. I really wish my mom could have been here. She's a huge fan of yours." And John said, "Well, where is she?" He said, "Oh, well, she's at the hospital today. She's in intensive care." And he said, "Well, let's go see her."
Holy smokes.
He said it's late Saturday night. It's already past closing time. I really appreciate that. That's really sweet. But, we'll have to work it out another time. He says, "Well, what are you doing in the morning?" And he said, "I'm not doing anything. I figured you guys have to get out of here and go to the next town." He says, "Tell you what, we'll tell us where to meet the bus with you, and we'll go down there and see her." So they did. They take the bus Sunday morning after a Saturday night show. And John and June, and we found an old picture recently. Marty went with them, Stewart. And they went up to the intensive care floor, not only visited her, they went to every room on that floor, met with, prayed with, sang with. They were just doing leapfrog. John would go in one room and June would go in the next one. And they were skipping down the hallway at a certain point, just spreading cheer, spreading goodwill. And that's how you become that. You got to have that heart and that spirit, that was above and beyond. And who knows how many times he did that in his career,
man,
different people.
I got goosebumps. That is, I mean, that's really like, my God, I don't even have any word. That's such an act of kindness,
Absolutely. And, you see stuff about John and June's past and the way he was when he was young. And yeah, he was a hellion. He raised a lot of hell, but he got it right. And I think that's the story about him that people need to hear. And you see how it affected even more so because a young Marty Stewart that was just a guitar player in his band saw that, learned from it, and soaked it up like a sponge. And he carries that onto his career now. And that legacy continues, And so that's, as we age in this business, guys like me, I start looking for guys that are 10 years younger than me that I can try to impart a little bit of this to and say, here's what I learned. Hopefully you learn it too. And maybe you can teach me something too. I don't know, but let's try to progress through all this together.
Man, that's a wonderful story. All three of that, the Glenn and the Oak Ridge Boys and John. Thank you for sharing that. That is really, really like heartwarming. Most important person in your life?
Probably my granddad, just because of everything he started, the legacy that was there, the business that he started. It gave me my livelihood. He raised my dad. My dad raised me. So it goes pretty deep as far as that goes. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Most important thing your dad taught you?
Commitment and loyalty. Don't give up. If you make a commitment to something, stick with it. Yeah.
Mom, most important thing your mom taught you?
Mom taught me unconditional love. And if you don't have something nice to say about somebody, keep your mouth shut. Be kind.
Yeah, man, be nice. That's what I always say, man. It's a lot. When you're younger, you don't realize how much easier your life is if you just be nice, man. It's like now that I'm older, I do everything to, okay, when I'm making a decision, it's say, okay, what's the least stressful alternative? And 90% of the time I go with that because it always works,
Well, you get a lot of pressure to not be a pushover in this industry and everything and really stand up for yourself. But at the end of the day, if you can find happiness in other people's success, always pat them on the back and just be genuinely kind to people, that does not go unnoticed.
Well, there's a big difference between kindness and weakness too. You can be kind and a strong person. I mean, I'm a very strong person, and I don't think the two are they're mutually exclusive. You can be a very kind, very strong person.
I completely agree.
What's your superpower, Brent?
Probably reading people.
Really?
I think that's what lends a lot to what I do as a producer. You know, my job when somebody comes in, if I've never worked with them, is to figure out very quickly what brought them here, what motivates them, how can I get a certain performance out of them today, how do I communicate with them. So I've got to learn to read them. I've got to learn to read, are they having a good day? Are they feeling good? Are they hiding something? You know, what is it about this lyric that they're having a hard time getting out? You know, or players knowing how to put people in a room together and keep the peace, being able to figure out they're not feeling a certain way, so we don't need to try to cut this song until the afternoon session. Let's not put it on the morning one. You know, and so just reading the room and reading people, I think is my superpower.
How did you develop that, you think? Or like what prompted that? Or, you know, what was the trigger?
I think those early years of working in those small custom studios, I don't know really, it's probably just a thing that I had a knack for, of learning to keep my mouth shut and my ears and eyes open, you know, and just pay attention. Because if you do, you'll learn that real quick. You'll be able to piece all this stuff together. I've always been really observant and a big picture person. And so, you know, if you do that, like I say, you can develop that. But if you're too busy talking about yourself and making your own noise in your own racket, you won't get it. You'll miss it.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I'm almost allergic to that. Like if I and I'm not really good at hiding it either, but I always feel like if that's all you're about, I don't really feel I owe you to hide it. You know, if you're the smartest guy in the room, I'm allowed to let you know my displeasure of that, or just leave. You know, really, I'm more like I let them know, because I don't stick around. I just have a short. I don't suffer fools easy, I guess is what it is. That's a character flaw I'm working on. Always a work in progress. You said you're married?
Was married. Yeah, the story didn't.
So the father of the year didn't work. The husband of the year thing didn't work.
That's why I say my regret was not networking more in those first few years.
So it didn't work, and it cost you money.
Yeah, it didn't do any good to be here all the time. So I should have been out networking anyway. No, I've been divorced about 3 years, but it's all good. It was amicable, and we're still friends and buddies. It's all good.
You have any kids?
No kids.
Well, that made things easier, man. Yeah, it takes about, because I was divorced I've been with my wife now 25 years, but it takes probably 3 to 4 years probably 3 years until you sort it out.
It does, and I didn't foresee that happening. I thought I was a guy that had it all together, and I thought I was going to just move right on and get things going, but it really does. I think just now here recently I've gotten to a place where I start feeling like me again, like pre-marriage me and everything.
Good for you.
I'm ready to go, and I feel good about it all right now.
That's good. I had a client many, many years ago, and he said there's a dirty 4-letter word that fixes everything. It's time.
Yes.
You know, and another thing I always think of when you just said, you know, I thought, you know, man plans, God laughs.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's like, who the hell knows what, you know, you have all these plans and expectations, man. I've learned just take it one day at a time. It's a lot less easier and a lot less disappointing on your expectations, man. Biggest business or personal win?
It's business win.
Or personal win.
It's hard to say. You know, I mean, I think my life has been a collection of a lot of small wins that have added up to a greater sum of things. You know, it's hard to pinpoint. Like I say, growing up the way we did, I don't have any kind of, you know, burning bush moment where it's like I figured out I have to be a musician and I have to do this or whatever. And then there was this huge successful moment. It's just like one little thing after another led me to where I am right now. You know, it's like playing golf. You know, you hit 72 good shots in a row and you've had a great day.
Yeah, I hear you. That was my next question. Outside of golf, you tell me when that happens. Outside of golf,
right.
Any other hobbies or interests outside of music?
Not really. We golf on the road a lot just to get away from the venue during the day.
That's great.
And I think there's so much to be learned from that game. And that's a whole nother blog that we could go into another time. You know, the fact that there is no referee and you don't actually compete against anyone else, there's nothing you can do to affect the other guy's golf score. You just compare them at the end of the day. And I think that's a really great analogy for life, you know, that if we all just kind of stuck to our own game and hit our own shots and at the end of it all, just compare scores. Then you'll know who did it right and who did it wrong. But I like that idea that it's not a combative sport, and there's no referee. You police yourself, so it's all about integrity. It's all about calling your own shot, your own penalties, and throwing flags on yourself, which I think is a great way to live. And the idea of playing it as it lies. I'll tell you a real quick story about that.
Yeah, sure.
My great uncle, my dad's uncle, when he died a few years ago, he was an avid golfer. He's actually who got me into golf in the first place, got all of us into golf. He was way into it. And at his funeral, he decided to make the theme of it, he played it as it lied. And that was his whole mantra. And he had us all take a golf ball. He had a basket of the golf ball that he played all the time and a Sharpie marker. And he wanted us to write his initials and the years that he lived on this golf ball, and wanted us to take it out on the course and at some point, wherever we were, somewhere cool, somewhere fun, play that ball, hit it, and leave it on the course and let somebody find it. And that would be, kind of his legacy.
Yeah.
So I went out, me and my dad went and played together one day to do this, and we decided this was going to be the day we were going to do that. And I got out there on this big, huge, great tee shot, downhill thing. It was going to be beautiful. And I thought, this is going to be awesome. So I get up there and just slam this ball and shank it out in the woods. It hitting trees and everything. I thought, well, there you go. Play it as it lies.
I'll leave it there.
And I take another ball and hit it and go ahead and play the hole. Well, as we drive down to go to the green, we're looking around, and I'm trying to find the second shot that I hit. And we see one sitting out in the middle of the fairway. And I go, well, maybe that's it. And we drive over, and you know what? It was that ball that I shanked out in the woods. It had hit a couple trees and bounced around and rolled right out in the middle of the fairway and was an awesome tee shot.
Wow.
And the lesson I took away from that was,
creepy.
As it lies, it may look bad at first, and then you may get down there and find out it's exactly where you wanted it to land.
That's awesome.
Such good analogy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got chills when you said that too. That was really awesome, man. Nice. And it's good that it happened when you were with your dad too. It's a good experience you guys to have. Very cool, man. Toughest decision you've ever had to make, or the hardest thing you've ever had to do?
I think professionally, every time you leave a gig, that's a tough decision. Like I say, I've never been fired from a gig, knock on wood. And so therefore, every time I've left, I've had to make that decision and decide that it's time to go on to something else, because you make friends on gigs. I don't think you ever really become true friends with an artist that you're working with, because they're very guarded, they're friendly with you, but they've got their own life and their own circle that they run in. And so I think it's smart to kind of keep a little bit of a wall up and not become really close friends, because it's a lot harder to leave your friends than it is to leave your business contacts.
Well, they're also like employers in a sense, and you're the employee. So any boss you're running, it's just...
It's a weird dynamic, because they are your employer and you're the employee, but they're extremely lonely people. They have this night, every night, where they go out, have a huge adrenaline rush, stand up in front of thousands of people that just cheer for them and love them and give them all this attention. And then when the show's over, they have to go be sequestered to about an 8x8 room in the back of a bus. And they can't get out, because if they do, it's pandemonium. It turns into a 2-hour meet and greet that management doesn't want them to do. And so that's a hard thing to come down from every night. And they rely on us a lot to be their friends, to be their group. You live together on this bus. We're on the road 160 days a year with Joe. That's half your year living with these people. I spend as much time with them or more than I do my family. And so when it's time to leave that's a really tough decision. And it's hard to keep those friendships alive with the other band guys, with crew people. And hopefully you don't, but you leave that to go spend 160 days a year with another group of people. So inevitably you're not going to see those people as much anymore as you used to. And that's a tough decision to make. Personally, you've been divorced, so that's a tough decision to allow that to happen and go through it all. Probably personally, that's the biggest thing I've been through that way. Hopefully it's the biggest.
Yeah, hopefully. I hope so too. It's interesting. The young man we talked about earlier, who used to be with you guys. He told me the same thing. That was his toughest thing he had to do. Yeah, for sure. And I've heard that several times. Actually, for me, that was an easy decision. What was tough was I had 2 little boys. So not seeing them, I was just at a point in time in the relationship where I was like, man, this is so unhealthy for me to stick around here. That was easy, but it was tough unwinding and figuring out how to live my life without my kids. And it eventually worked out better because I became a better person, better dad, and stuff like that. But
my brother's dealt with that a lot because he's got 3 boys now, and they're at that age where it's hard to leave. You know, they want to know, why are you leaving again, Dad? And we were fortunate growing up; we got to play with our parents as kids, so we never experienced that as kids. Of seeing Dad go away and have to do that and tour and play music. It probably would have been easier if we had seen that side of it, but we didn't. So for me, I don't have kids. It keeps me busy, keeps me on the road, and I'm okay with it.
Good for you, man. Actually, 2 more questions. Most important lesson that your business has taught you?
Probably just be open to anything. You know, be prepared to take any gig that comes in the door, and whatever you do it well. Do it to the best of your ability. You know, when I moved to town, the only goal I had was to be successful in the entertainment business. And I know that's an extremely big picture concept, but my mentality on it was, if I play in somebody's band for 4 or 5 years and then I get into production, and then maybe a management company calls and says, hey, we want somebody with your skill set to work for us and be a manager, or go work at a label and get into A&R with my skill set, or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to make a living in this industry. And I'm not going to sit back, like you say, and make plans and try to tell God, here's how I want my living to be provided for me. You know, he's given me a lot of opportunity in the 37 years I've lived so far to see every different side of this business, from being on stage and performing, to pushing faders, to popping popcorn, taking tickets, you name it. I've gotten to do all of it. And so I'm open to whatever it is that's going to let me work till I'm 65 or 70 being around this industry, because I love it. I love entertaining people. I love making music and art. I mean, heck, even if it takes me into the film side of things, you know, and you start scoring for movies and learning that side of the industry, you know, there's a lot of different ways to make a living here, and I'm open to any of it.
Well, I'll tell you, you're a super interesting guy for all the stuff you do, and I'd love to have you back in like 2 or 3 years on this show because, well, I know I think that the production stuff you're doing is like taking you down another path, and it'd be interesting to see where that leads you.
Yeah.
And
I think so too. You know, I think it's going to be an interesting 2 or 3 years ahead of me because of what I've developed and because of how this town is changing. Nashville has evolved so much in the last 3 years, you know, leading up to now. And we've hit a place where there's a very different approach to the record business, because we're not making money selling records anymore. We're making money by supplying content to the streamers and the subscription services and things like that. And so, you know, we're all going to have to figure out how the business model needs to change in order for us to continue doing what we're doing for a living. You know, I get more and more calls every day for songs to be placed in film and TV and stuff like that, which is really exciting because you don't have to keep writing the same song that's in that same box down the middle lane that's going to work at radio. You can write some really fun, interesting stuff that works for a scene in a movie. So, you know, and the way we produce records, you know, the old model of getting a band together with an engineer and an artist at the studio downtown and doing all that is dying a quick death. And I hate that because I like that process. It's fun. I grew up studying that and learning it. But you can't fight the change that's happening. And, you know, what people expect to hear on a record now can't be done that way in a timely fashion. And so, you know, that's why we have to change what we're doing. One thing, though, that I know is that the value of a producer is higher than it's ever been, because there are a lot of artists that have little to no experience with anything. They haven't been on stage. They haven't played clubs. They haven't played bars. They have no fan base. They don't know what they're doing. And they need people to guide them. They need people to say, okay, here's the song you've written, but I've been on stage before. I've played. I know how that's going to translate. and here's what you need to know from my vantage point. Now let's make a record, you know.
And I think you're smart in that you're looking at developing younger artists, because that's where that's frankly where the future is, you know.
That's right.
And like once the baby boomers die, like my generation, like I buy records. I don't stream. I stream only if I have to listen to someone I'm interviewing's stuff. Right. I never stream. I have to like set the whole thing up every time. But I have like 40,000, because my relationship with music is different. I want to know, I want to listen to a song, and if I like it, I want to listen to the whole album. Then I want to listen to the whole catalog, because I want to see, where did this band or artist start? Where are they today? You know, I want to have a relationship musically with that human being. That's a dinosaur attitude. That doesn't.
And where it's changing is, I think artists still, or fans still want to have that with their artists, but it's developing more in a live way.
Yeah,
you know?
They want to talk to them on social media. They don't. Yeah. It's like the music is sort of secondary, whereas I don't care about talking to someone on social media. I want to, listen to their music. That's,
Exactly. And so I try to stay in touch as much as I can with younger listeners and fans. I try to go out after shows and talk to people and meet our demographic, talk to the clientele, find out who they like, how they're listening to music, because that's your real market research. It doesn't
100%.
matter. It doesn't matter what a survey told you in an office on Music Row. When you go stand in a field with a bunch of folks from Wisconsin and have a couple beers with them and find out, how do you listen to music and who do you like? Who are you downloading, streaming, buying, whatever? You get some real answers real quick.
Yeah, man, that's 100% right. I agree with you.
Yeah. And so.
Last question, man. Not an easy one. What's your definition of happiness, knowing that this changes over time?
I think my definition of happiness is when the books balance, if that makes sense. For me, if I know that I have the right amount of time to do the right amount of things that I want to do this week while I'm in town, or if I've put out a certain amount of effort and the right amount of compensation came back where I feel content about that, that balance of knowing that it all worked out. I think what frustrates me the most is when I feel like I've put out way too much and not gotten near enough back, or I've got way too much work to do this week and not near enough days to do it. That's what starts making me unhappy. Or if you see somebody that it seems like they've gotten a lot more than what they deserve because they didn't put out any work at all, and it's easy to get bogged down on those rabbit trails. So for me, happiness comes in balance, when I can look at it and see that everything is as it should be.
Good, man. Hey, listen, thank you for everything. I want to just that story, leave it where it lies. That was really good, man. Thank you.
One day.
That's good. Hey, let me tell people where they could find you online, and I can't thank you enough for your time, Brent. Brent Rader, BrentRader. You can check him out when he's on the road with Joe Nichols. You're producing Joe's stuff now, so you'll be involved heavily with the next record.
Hopefully, yeah. He's working with a few different producers on different things, but he's kind of tapped me for the traditional stuff right now.
Awesome. McKenzie Knapps, Knapps, up-and-coming artist Brent is working with. And you can also check him out on Facebook or Instagram. Again, it's Brent Rader, BrentRader. Hire him, send him money, be nice, and buy him a beer when he's in Wisconsin with you. Dude, thank you, man. You're awesome. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing all the stories, man. It was awesome.
Greg.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, and thanks again to Brent Rader for spending all his time with us and being so transparent. Go to everyonelovesguitar.com and sign up to get notified of future episodes, along with some cool stuff for guitar players. And be nice, go play your guitar and have some fun. Till next time, I'm out. Peace, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.